I'm on Power 5 this morning, and I want to talk about perseverance. How many, if you're part of this church, you know that every year the Lord gives Jeremiah a word for the year, and I remember when he came to me in January, and he gave us that word, and I'm like, oh, crap. Because you know what perseverance means, right? I wasn't overly excited about it because perseverance just sounds like work and hardship, right? And I didn't like that word, but I do now because God has shifted my perspective on it. Growing up, I've always felt like my life has been like super blessed. I've always served God. Since I was 6 years old, I gave my heart to the Lord and strove really hard to serve him. And I always thought super, super blessed. I had hardships, but I had a lot of miracles and a lot of provisions in my life, right? Honestly, I thought it was his favorite. But I know some of you think that too, and you probably are. Last few years, at least 5 or so, life has been very, very challenging for me on a personal level. But I've learned to be okay with that because in this journey, our goal is to become more and more like the Father, to walk closer and closer to him, right? And God has just been taking me into a deeper level in him and faith in him than I even thought was possible, which is really exciting. But God is always drawing us closer to him, taking us into a deeper relationship with him, especially when he knows that our hearts are seeking. And if you're hungry, and if you want to know God more and you're going, God, I want more of you, he's gonna answer that prayer. And a lot of times it is through testing and through trials, because testing and trials show us where our hearts are at in our faith, in our relationship with God, right? And so perseverance, I came across this scripture. Jeremiah's been talking on James chapter 1:3, and I'll read it. It says, "Consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces perseverance." Some translations say endurance, some translations say patience. On my phone, I have my Bible on my phone. It's got the Strong, so I can actually look at the Greek or the Hebrew word. And I'm not even going to try to say the word for you, but it means endurance, steadfastness, constancy. And in my little app, when it gives the Greek definition, it's got a little note on the bottom, and this blew me away. And it said, perseverance in the New Testament is the characteristic of a man or woman who is not swerved from his deliberate purpose and his loyalty to faith and piety, which means devotion to God, even by the greatest trials and suffering. I'm going to read that again. Perseverance is the characteristic of a man who is not swerved from his deliberate purpose and his loyalty to faith and piety, meaning devotion to God, by even the greatest of trials and sufferings. And I was struck by this because I thought, perseverance, I got to fight for this. I got to work for this. I got to be aggressive in this, right? I got to work my way through this problem or this struggle that I'm having. And so for me, perseverance was an effort. But this shifted my perspective because now I learned that I'm going to stand. I'm going to stand firm in the place of anything that comes my way. I'm going to learn to stand my ground, stand in faith, keeping my eyes on the Father and not being moved. I'm not going to swerve from my purpose in serving God. I'm not going to be moved from my loyalty and my faith in the Father, no matter how hard it gets. It's standing in deliberate purpose. It's being unmoved by emotion to fear and to be angry with God. Because you know what? There's times in my life when I got angry at God because I did not understand. And God, why did you do this? And what that fear and that anger does, you know what it does? It shifts you away from God. Right? And perseverance means to stand, being unswerved no matter what comes your way. And so this has been my opportunity when I come and I'm going through a struggle and I go, God, I don't understand. And this is hard. And I learned that how little my faith was. But you know what? The more I go, God, I'm just going to serve you and I'm going to stand. And there's times when I had to get on my knees and cry and pray before the Father. And you know that beautiful peace. Oh, The beautiful peace that God gives us comes because when we stand and we're not moved by fear, and we don't walk in fear, and we're not angry at God, but we are submitting ourselves and saying, God, I'm not moving off of my faith. God, I'm not moving off of my place where I'm trusting in you. I'm going to walk in you. I'm going to trust you. I'm going to keep my eyes on you. I'm going to persevere. And the beautiful part of that verse is what? What's the last part of that? Like having done all to stand, but here in this scripture it says, let perseverance, let that steadfastness, let that deliberate purpose in standing have its perfect work in you so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. See, God has so much for us, and we don't want to lack. We like that part. I don't want to lack anything, God. I don't want to lack your joy, your peace, your strength, your spirit. But we forget that we have to just stand and be purposeful in it and not be moved. Don't give in to temptation, to fear. Don't get into anger with God, but you stand. And at the end, guess what? You got the joy, and you got the peace, and you've got the strength, and you're moved into this deep, powerful place in this relationship with God. And it's a beautiful place. And today's communion, and as I was preparing this, I thought, that's what Jesus did on the night that he was betrayed. And he went into the garden. And I can't imagine the weight of what Jesus carried that night in the garden when he was so stressed, knowing not how he was going to die, that he was going to die, but that he was going to take on himself our sin, the sin of the world. He was going to be the perfect lamb whose blood was going to be shed so that we can come, now the Gentiles, us, we can come to the Father and have this beautiful, powerful relationship with God.